Nigerians encourage corruption, cites June 1st of the Punch newspaper.
David Mark says it's been a day.
America's Nigerian Governors Forum calls for Okonjo Iweala's resignation.
Says new PDP.
Page 2 of the Punch newspaper.
The dailies every day on Core TV News.
All right, let me quickly run you through top stories making headlines on some of Nigerian dailies. I have the Guardian, the Vanguard, as well as the Punch newspaper. While fuel price should go down now by Labour, that's the big one on the front page of the Guardian newspaper today. And the writers here say petroleum workers may begin zonal strike today. Not quite a good day to start as we count down to Christmas. Government loses 24 billion naira yearly to crude oil import waivers. How dependence on oil aids graft. Now, beautiful picture here on the front page of The Guardian. If you can get it, it's the Ajosia Diogo roundabout in Victoria Island, Lagos. At the weekend, looks like Christmas really is in town. And to other news notes, Adamawa Monarch urges residents return to Mobi even while he is staying back. Government begins commissioning of East-West Road in sections. That's on page 7. Urhobo Union hasn't endorsed any governorship candidate. To get details on page 71 if you care to check. ACF divided over support for Buhari. That's on page 4. And police pensioners may get benefits soon. Page 6 of The Guardian. Let's move away quickly from there to the front page of the Punch this morning. Oil, gas workers begin nationwide strike today. FLAI non-repair of refineries, delayed passage of the PIB. Details on page 36. Well, very, very sad picture here. Ondo State Governor Dr. Olusegun Mimiko and others during their visit to victims of the Akure gas explosion at the Ondo Trauma and Surgical Center. We showed you clips of that fire outbreak earlier on our news bulletin. FRC to review Main Street Enterprise Bank sale. That's on page 37. And PFAs pay 17.96 billion naira to sacked workers on page 33. Exploded gas facility has no approval. Mimiko. Page 18. Apply for protection. Police tell Tamboa. Page 18 of the Punch. And Stallion to start Volkswagen vehicle production in Nigeria. Page 36 of the Punch. Well, Toucher couple petition IG. That's on page 4. The once power drunk cop punished. You get details on pages 4 and 5 of the Punch. Alright, our final point of call is the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Aftermath of PDP primaries, senators plot to impeach Mark. Quite a number of riders here. Consider APC senators Saraki Akume as replacements. Vow to mobilize support for Tambuwa. Mark dismisses impeachment plot as rumor. APC reps plot to impeach Jonathan Thickens. And 168 reps endorse notice. The front page picture here also shows the victim of the Akure gas explosion. Adeboye to minister at Vanguard Thursday. That's on page 8. Pregnant woman, 7 others injured, 20 shops razed in Ondo gas explosion. Oil price fall, prepare for hard times. Federal government cautions NDIC others. That's on page 8. Now let's quickly take a glimpse at sports at the back page of the Vanguard this morning. MFM wins Church World Cup. And Siasia, I'm not depending on foreign-based stars. That's on page 59. Yobo returns to South Africa. And you see jawbreaker here, Amir Khan won in a unanimous decision over David Alexander in Las Vegas. Top stories inside. Victor Moses to return in New Year. 3 Zambian players stable after fatal accident. And Paul Bassi writes on Sports Spectacular. Alright, that wraps it on the dailies. You can be sure to get every update, every top of the hour on Core TV News. That's exactly what we do. I'm joined now in our live set by Biodun Soumi, a public affairs analyst. Good morning and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here.
All right, ahead 2015 general elections, quite a number of matters are rising at this time. But let's start with the results of the primaries that trickled in last week for the APC. It was the former head of state, General Muhammadu Buhari, and of course, the PDP as well was able to ratify Mr. President as his candidate. Many are already talking about a Buhari versus Jonathan election in 2015. Do you agree with that?
Oh yes, what we've seen so far is that we've seen a reversal of what normally took place in the past, whereby APC would have a coronation and PDP will have a kind of semi-convention. So we've seen that being turned around, following much criticisms of what the APC was doing, well then ACN was doing. The leadership seems to have responded in a way that we now have a true convention, which was being live to everybody on TVC.
On television.
Yeah, on television. So it was clear that it was fair, well organized, and the delegates were able to cast their votes for their own preferred choice. But when you look at the other side of it, it seems PDP had stepped, made 2 steps backward rather than going forward. They've actually gone back to the era of coronation. Strangely, some would argue that the incumbent should have that advantage of the first right of refusal. The problem with Nigeria is that PDP's leadership of the country in the last 16 years is such that has not yielded the desired result. Many people are so disappointed in it, including members of the PDP themselves. And therefore, you are likely going to have a challenge in that situation. In other climes where you have the incumbent having performed, you are less likely going to have a challenge. But we've seen how that those who are likely going to challenge the president or the dark horses or whatever we call them, got crushed, and then President Jonathan was presented. So it was more or less a coronation.
But
so
that was
it's a step
obviously
backward from
a consensus arrangement, because just like you said, in every climb, so to speak, there's always that benefit and that advantage of incumbency. The National Working Committee all came together and endorsed Mr. President for a second term. Would that require any primary election, so to speak?
Yes, the way and manner it was on. It wasn't that people within the PDP did not want to challenge the president. The president ensured that they were crushed.
One would have thought that all of those who would have wanted to challenge Mr. President already decamped with the Kawu Baraje-led group in 2013.
Look, that's not necessarily true. Apart from those who failed to lead, people like Sule Lamido, who had indicated his intention to challenge the president, he was silenced. His 2 sons were held like hostage, being harassed, presented before the courts on charges not yet proven. I'm not saying they are innocent of those charges, but not yet proven. So it was like a hostage. Then we have the situation of other people, at least 2 other people, Tafawa Balewa, did, and Abiola. They did collect the funds. The PDP collected their money and refused to give Mrs. Abiola a nomination form. So what's that supposed to mean? So it's so clear that the leadership of the PDP, which Mr. President is a part.
Do you actually see all those people as major contenders? Because we even saw the semi-national convention, even the primary election, the presidential primary election held in 2011. You saw that indeed Mr. President won in a landslide victory. For instance, someone like the Tafawa Balewa you made mention, does it look like a contender to you?
No, that's the essence of democracy is for people to have a choice.
He stepped down eventually.
He was pressured, to step down. they had to lean on him to step down in order to achieve, that goal
Well,
of
we can
saying,
confirm that
"Look,
on this platform.
We-
It was the same man we saw on TV who
Precisely,
insisted that he
denying
was
it.
going to. He looked
Yes.
quite passionate about contesting.
Precisely.
He also said he eventually collected his nomination form. Nomination form. So, what kind of pressure are we talking about here?
It was clear. What about Mrs. Abiola? She paid. Was she given a nomination form? Was she allowed to contest? Look, it's a clear. The point here is that PDP is stepping, backwards. It has laid some pretenses to internal democracy in the past, but this time around they are not even doing that. What we had in Abuja was not a convention in the real sense of it. It was a coronation, of the king. You can see the picture, the king, coming, right into the center. It was all orchestrated. And you don't feel the tension. Some of my friends who are within the PDP told me they were even busy watching, the APC convention. The point being made is that PDP, that used to pride itself, in its pretenses to internal democracy, has clearly moved away from that. The opposition party, APC, now, in the days of the ACN, who used to get criticized. ACN used to get a lot of flags for imposing candidates or coronation and all that. They have now made progress. They've
The
been
special
able to move
assistant
forward
to the
from
president
it.
said that obviously the PDP members that they come to the APC must have taught them how to go about the elective national convention.
Oh, if they're saying that, then they must be saying that the few good Democrats in PDP have moved to APC. I wouldn't expect them to say that, because that's what it meant. If they're saying that it's the PDP people that moved to APC that taught them internal democracy, then what happened to the main PDP itself that is now imposing candidate?
But if the PDP had the presidential primary election, the president obviously would have won convincingly.
No, it's not obvious. You can deploy the presidential might. So many people predicted Atiku will win that election, and Atiku did not win it. You just cannot tell. We've seen situations in Nigeria where a man led his 4 wives and about 10 children to the polling booth and only had 1 vote. And he was not too sure whether any of his wife or children voted for him. He had only 1 vote. He led 4 wives and 10 children to the polling booth, and he was a contestant. And he had only 1 vote. So you can't tell. That's what democracy is about. That's what secret ballot is about. People will decide who they want to vote for. They don't have to tell you. And at the end of the day, they must have that right. Depriving them of the opportunity, to make a choice. It's the problem here.
Okay, what significant impact do you see this having on the PDP? Because it looks as if all the major stakeholders, the governors, the NWC, mention them, all the big names in the PDP, all are in support, no doubt, of Mr. President. Because you see the governor of the PDP, NGF there.
Yes, that is true. The president has had his ways. But the issue is this. There is a kind of democratic deficit, in PDP's internal primaries. That is what is becoming obvious. It means the PDP we have today is worse than the PDP we had at the last election, because that was internal primaries, internal democracy, in the primaries organized in 2011. Now today we have a PDP where everything is now done by coronation. Go and look at all the primaries. It's crisis everywhere. In Ondo State, as I'm speaking to you, is 2 people per each post. From House of Assembly up to any level is 2 people, because the party is badly divided. In so many other places, in Ogun State, they're yet to have announced all their candidates. Again, they are being done through the back door, because the convention, the PDP Congress organized in Ogun State was not acceptable to some leadership, some part of the leadership in Abuja. So now they're now trying to sort it out through, you take this, I will take that, you take this, I will take that. So what we're clearly seeing, PDP is going backwards instead of moving forward. The PDP we have today now is even worse than the PDP in 2011 in terms of internal democracy within that party. Yeah.
But let's move away quickly from the PDP. Not quite a number of people will agree with you on that, especially the PDP faithful, who will tell you one of them is the NOI polls that have been coming out with certain statistics recently that Mr. President still prides itself as the favorite of the Nigerian electorate. electorate at any time. But let's go to the APC. There are speculations growing as regards who will emerge as the running mate of the PDP presidential, the APC presidential candidate, General Muhammadu Buhari. Over the weekend, there were even insinuations and rumors as regards a particular name being named. But the National Publicity Secretary came out to say that they have not even met yet. But it looks as if the APC is divided between a politician and a technocrat. Which way do you think it's better to go at this time?
I think the choice of who would be the vice president to General Muhammadu Buhari is strictly a matter for APC. But it also attracts some interest from the public in the sense that Nigeria wants a change, a real change. Things are going back. The economy is going down the drain. We've seen for the third time now the federal government having to adjust, the budget, the baseline price, which they base the budget on, and yet we don't have a real verifiable alternative, sustainable alternative to ensure that the needs of the country can be met financially. So when you face this situation, we're faced with serious security problems. So people are bound to be interested in who is going to be worth within the context of national elections now. Now, I know that whichever way we go, what the APC leaders need to do is to take into consideration, a winning team, that can change the situation on the ground. One, the issue of security is very important because we don't want this country to collapse. If you don't want the countries to collapse, it means we need to have the right people with the right solutions, in place that the public can have confidence in and support, to steer us through this trouble.
There are also talks as regards the impact of the choice of person on the APC chance, or the chances rather, of the APC in the 2015 election. Amechi, for instance, who is also on the list, the governor of Rivers State, many are saying has a very controversial personality, quite extroverted also. And then you place him side by side with the Professor Oshibanjo, who used to be Accountant General, I believe, in Lagos State. I was going to make it more specific. Which of these two people, we're assuming here, not definitely, there's no list here, but we're assuming, take Amechi typical of a politician. As a matter of fact, a PDP stalwart who came to the APC, and then place it side by side with a technocrat who is a bit detached from the political arena.
Yeah, basically, but there's one recurring decimal in right in there. Both of them are Christians,
okay.
And that fact must not be lost on us. I personally don't believe that religion matter when it comes to choosing the best, candidates to rule the country. I don't believe in it, but politicians have been playing it up one way or the other. Now, when you look at that, Professor Yemi Osinbajo is a fine gentleman, a technocrat who has been the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos. And then you have Amechi. The question is this: who amongst them would have value electorally in terms of votes? I rather think Amechi would. He has a broad support base. Yes, he can be an extrovert, but he has this base. No matter what anyone says, he can add more than enough votes, than what Professor Oshibanjo can add. That's so much said, but that also shouldn't preclude the consideration of Oshibanjo, because at the end of the day, he is also a very well-respected man and someone capable and able to do the job. And in addition to that, what you need is, once you have a party structure behind you, that could also change the situation on the ground. So either of them, I think, will be making a good choice. Irrespective of Amechi's being very extrovert, nobody can deny the fact that he's a very courageous man who has done all the needful in terms of uplifting the living standard of his people in Rivers State, and he has a better understanding of the situation in the country. So I don't see what is wrong with him.
The processes that led to the just concluded distribution of permanent voter cards and continuous voters registration was characterized with certain level of displeasure coming from the Nigerian people. in your informed opinion, how prepared would you say the Independent National Electoral Commission is today for the 2015 election?
INEC is really giving so many people food for thought, because we've had several assurances from INEC in the past, and they've all come to nothing. I know that many people express concern when we were to have Ekiti and Osun elections. We actually called on INEC to actually experiment with this permanent voters card and including this electronic voting, so that we can afford to make mistakes in Ekiti, try and correct it in Osun, so that by the time we get to national elections, then we have a perfect system. But for some reasons, INEC decided not to do that. So again, now we now find ourselves unable to distribute voters card alone. So how are we going to organize an election, which will be acceptable to everybody without disenfranchising our people? Just on the last day of the collection of the PVCs and registration for it, I got a call from some people in around Gowan Estate, Yanokwaja area, and they were all complaining that they could not even find the INEC officials around there. And people were getting so angry. They felt, they were planning to disenfranchise them. Yes, INEC has assured and kept assuring people that, look, you still have the opportunity of collecting it. But it's not, very encouraging. I think INEC really needs to get his act together, because frustration can lead to so many things. And at the end of the day, perception matters. Perception can make people feel the outcome of an election is okay or not. So it's all, we need to work on that. INEC needs to do a lot more to ensure that people are able to get their permanent voters card.
There are questions as regards how much involved are political parties in this ongoing political education, educating the electorate. For instance, many people do not know that you can still access INEC at any of the 774 local governments in Nigeria to collect your PVC. There are some who are of the opinion that is it not featured that political parties are playing down on this at this particular time?
No, INEC has the responsibility for that. On voters' education, it is up to INEC. INEC needs to educate people.
Does that totally exempt the political parties?
It doesn't, because they are stakeholders, but they do not necessarily have the constitutional responsibility for it. INEC has the constitutional responsibility and also has the budget for it.
But that's what I'm saying, that if parties would solely depend on the vote of the electorate, shouldn't that be germane on their minds and in their electoral campaigning strategies at this particular time? Does it not tell you anything that if parties, for instance, are not concerned about the number of PVCs that are being collected, then maybe they have an alternative or a plan B to winning elections?
To be fair, I only went to about 3 states during that period, and which is Lagos, Ogun, and Osun during the period. But I could see the party officials, including the governors, running around, trying to encourage the people to go out and get the voters card. In some places, they even use a public address system, to call on the people to explain to them in marketplaces. In Ogun, I saw the governor, moving around the whole local governments, trying to check what is going on and encouraging people to do that. So the party on their own part are doing it. The problem is, if you can't find INEC officials at the right place, then you have a problem. For instance, I'm here to collect my own permanent voters card. My name was on the list, 843, but then my card was not there when I turned up, and I was told they will bring it some other time. I should come back. I came back. The gentleman who was supposed to give it to me said he went on break. I waited for 3 hours. He didn't come back, so I got frustrated. I left, with the hope to go and pick it up some other time again, from the local government. So this is the frustrating experience of so many people. We don't need to make simple things difficult for our people. Collecting a permanent voter's card should never be as stressful as what people are going through currently. So INEC needs to get their acts together. They have a constitutional responsibility. They also have the finance, to fulfill that. So it's not necessarily up to the political parties, it's actually up to INEC. We just live in a country where institutions are not being held to account. INEC should be made to account for all the public funds given to it, to carry out this exercise.
Right.
And that is one of the issues. Otherwise, we are in a serious problem if we disenfranchise our own people. The impression people will have at the end of the day is that the election, the outcome will not be credible or fair.
But would you say that INEC have improved over time? For instance, some have said that if not for the improvement of INEC, the opposition might not be in control of most of the states it has now.
No, I would rather give it to the people. Because when you look at what happened in Osun State, it was the people of Osun that stood and said, no, we will not accept intimidation. INEC was a part and parcel of the intimidation of the electorate. For instance, on no account can soldiers be deployed within the country. You can only deploy soldiers, outside the country or at our borders. For internal policing, what the Constitution says clearly is that it behoves on the chief security officer of the state, to request if you need such level of assistance. And the Constitution made a provision that there must have been a total breakdown of law and order. Was there a total breakdown of law and order in Osun? No, that wasn't. Did the governor, as the chief security officer of the state, requested for that massive deployment of 73 armed forces, 73,000 armed forces? Did he request for it? No. How can we justify that? Do we even have the necessary armed forces to, conduct elections throughout the whole country now? We don't. The fact of the matter is, there are better ways to conduct elections and police it without having to resort to brute force.
Can we quickly
we are doing it.
Open the phone lines for our viewers to call in. The line is on your screen. Please ensure to turn down the volume of your TV set while you call. Let's keep the conversation on telephone, because there's a little delay between what we say here and what you hear on your Star Times device. Now, let's talk about another important topic of discussion at this time is security. Apart from insecurity in the name of terrorism, there are also certain violence that characterize elections in Nigeria. For instance, in Oyo State, at the wake of electoral campaigns, there were disasters.
Even a police officer was killed.
And the family house of the former governor was razed down and all of that. Just over the weekend also, there was another particular political violence in Ibadan, the Agbeni market. How do we ensure that violence is being stamped down at this very sensitive time in our national history?
The problem we have is leadership of the security agencies. If the leadership is heavily politicized, the guys, at the bottom, take a cue from that. That is one thing with the Nigerian police force. When you had people like the former IG, Mohammed, he came in and he said, no, he doesn't want any roadblocks on the road and all that. People said, oh, there will be crime, there will be this and that. The level of crime did not go up. But what happened is harassment of Nigerians and corruption at the checkpoints went down. Now we have a new IG, Abba Suleiman, who from all indications seems to have politicized his office.
Just a minute before you go on. Let's take this call. Sorry for cutting you short. Hello, good morning, Jagede. Are you there?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Go ahead with the contribution.
Good morning.
Go ahead with the contribution, Jagede.
I want to contribute to what Mr. Shoyin is trying to explain
Okay.
on this point. I want to say what we had in Osun at the last election was near intimidation, and it was the people that actually won the election, not the INEC perfection or in their imperfection that made the nation to go out well. Another thing that the problem of the INEC must be seen to be doing the right thing about the PDP. A lot of people are disenfranchised not because they don't want to pay their PVC, but because INEC is putting up they are putting in a lot of problems along the way. They don't make it easy for people to get. If it's easy for people to register, to collect the card must not be as easy and he forced to do the registration. That's another thing. I'm not sure about the, we are talking about the VP, the Vice President for APC. But I want to believe this. APC is an amalgamation of parties, from APM to PDP to ANPP, and now they have a broad-based opposition party in place. And when by their primary elections, we have seen them clear and free, by the primary elections, that brought about Buhari and the president candidate. But the good thing, I want to think, I don't believe in this Muslim Christian ticket. I don't believe in it. But if the nation is asking for a Muslim Christian ticket, well, so do it. And I make you is good. Democratically, it's on the ground. So also, Oshiba is good in Lagos. It's on the ground. But I want to believe this. If Buhari, you imagine as the president and it comes from CPC, and Amity is now coming from PDP. From the largest, to APC, from PDP. I want to believe the order of the old source, the ACN old source, nothing for them. That's the way I'm looking at people. In the extra value, I wouldn't want to say whoever is better, but I want to see also that we have installed and installed where they're coming from and where they are revived as APC.
It's all right.
God bless you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your contribution, Jagade, calling from Osun State. Does that really matter that there is no true ACN stock in the combination if they go with Buhari and Amaechi?
Yeah, he's making a very important point, which is maybe an issue for the legacy ACN. You know, ACN is one of the legacy parties, you know, within the APC. The issue at the present time is clearly the best people that can do the job. The legacy ACN leadership are part and parcel of those who are making that decisions. I'm sure a lot of factors will be taken into consideration. It's strictly not going to be just about ACN producing somebody. I think they will focus also on somebody who can do the job, you know, who is able, energetic, and is able to add value to the ticket. You know, so I think they will consider so many other factors. Yes, it's not unlikely that the leadership of ACN, the legacy party, you know, will be encouraged to take the decision on his own. That is what some people within the PDP, if you look at today's newspaper, are trying to interpret as overbearing influence of the Tinubu axis, you know, in making that decision on Buhari. But I think it's just a reflection of the facts, because where you have four parties coming together, there's also what they call equity. You can't have one primarily dominating without the others also having, you know, becoming equal stakeholders in that project. So I think that's what he's alluding to. But at the end of the day, a lot of factors will be taken into consideration, because there's so many other posts also, you know, that
there's a status call of okay, we have Tochukwu calling from Anambra. Hello, good morning, Tochukwu.
Good morning, my brother Bisadi.
Yeah, good morning.
As regards the issue of 2015 election, I think the timeline is right for us to engage in issue-based campaign, and I will advise the All Progressive Congress to talk less on the PDP. You see, whether we like it or not, indirectly, they are promoting because of PDP when they're talking about their inabilities. I, for one, personally wouldn't vote for any aspirant who spent so much time in talking about the ruling party, the incumbent, instead of concentrating in explaining what he or she will do for me, what he or she will do differently. You see, there are sentiments, and there is no doubt in 2015 is going to play out. Over here in the East,
a particular sentiment is being shared. Some people believe that even if Jonathan is the worst, he should be allowed to complete his term. After all, Obasanjo was allowed, and he wasn't the best, but he was allowed to take his turn. So we see these sentiments around all over the country, and I believe Buhari over there in the north, they share some sentiments too. So we are not going to deny all these things, but what we are not advocating is let us concentrate on issues, not propaganda, not what somebody has done wrong, but what should we do better. You see, these are the things I want Nigerians to focus their mind on. And as regards the consensus, I beg to disagree with your guest there. I'm sorry. It said something about PDP going 2 steps further. No. Except when you argue that the right of sex refusal, it's not democratic. But I beg to say that it is democratic all over the crimes. You see the ruling party giving the incumbent the right of sex refusal, and to have done well, except the party want to differ on that ground that he hasn't done well. And after all, if you watch the primaries, you will agree with me that all these incumbents control the structure. So even when we pretend not to give them the right of sex refusal and conduct primaries for them, they still end up winning. What's the All Progressive Congress? All of the incumbents, are there somebody to come up to tell me that a primary was organized for the incumbents in the governorship level? These things, we know how it works. The incumbents always carry the day.
In mock primary.
So I will advocate that from henceforth, if the incumbents are doing well, the party should endeavor to give them the right of sex refusal so that they can continue instead of wasting our resources. So this is my concern on this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, good to hear from you today, Tochukwu from Anambra State. I think we should just cash in on that to continue our discussion on violence as it has to do with campaigns. He talked about issue-based campaigns. What impact do you think that has had thus far on this incessant violence, political violence, so to speak?
The political violence has its own toll. When you look at the number of people participating in elections in the country, it's really disheartening. I mean, if you have a country of 150, 170 million people, and then you only have 18 million, you know, as was the case in 2011, electing the president, you know, that voted for the president, Buhari, with about 12 million and Ribadu about 3 million. You know, it's quite very depressing. Well, how come we can't even have a third of our own population voting, you know, in the country? It's like we are alienating the voters, you know, with the violent situation. Then the over-militarization of elections, the use of soldiers, you know, gun-toting soldiers to threaten people, the use of masks made by Department of State Security, you know, these are all factors contributing to low turnout in elections. And when you actually consider, let me give you a good example so that we understand what it means. Look at Ekiti, for instance. In Ekiti, there are 766,744 eligible voters. Then the total number of people that elected Fayose was just about 209,000. The total number of people that voted for Kayode Fayemi was 120,000, with Opeyemi Bamidele having 18,000. When you add it all up together, you realize that hardly do we have 50%, you know, of the eligible voters actually voting or participating in the Ekiti elections. Now, the pressing side of it is when you now consider the total number of voters that elected the governor. The total number of voters that elected the governor in percentage terms, 209,000. In percentage terms, it's exactly 27.68%.
Of the eligible voters.
Of the eligible voters. So we're saying 27.68% of eligible voters in Ekiti, you know, elected the governor. So what happened to the rest of the voters? Are they against the governor? Did they boycott the election? Or were they scared by the violence, you know, or the heavy militarization,
well, how do we
of the
bridge
election?
The
so
gap now?
Yes.
If we have political violence at one point, I mean at one side, and then we have militarization at the other side, one would have thought that the only way to curb political violence, so to speak, would be the presence of the military. But just before you answer that, let's take this call from Stephen. Good morning, Stephen. Welcome to Call Digest.
Yeah, I would like to contribute to this program.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Go ahead, Stephen. We're with you.
Okay.
I want to correct something from what our guest today talked about, that everybody knew that Atiku will win that primary election in Lagos. I don't think it was, that statement was true. Buhari was going to win that election. People should not see APC as a state party. We don't know what's going on in the caucus of the APC, where there is a kind of domination by an individual in different angles. It's just that we need to manage it. We all knew that Buhari was an elected man of Tinubu. So for us to come and say that there was somebody election in Lagos, it was not that it was we knew what went wrong. Even President Government arranged all the delegates, talked to them. It's part of the war system, but we should not see it as a failure. Though they have issues, we should talk on business so that we educate Nigerians of what's going on. Now, when Buhari was talking or giving his speech, I never heard anything meaningful from what is hoping to do for Nigeria. If you are seeing somebody is wrong, not doing the right thing, tell us what should have been done right, not criticizing without having alternatives for Nigeria. Issue of power, we not heard anything from them. The issue of the economy, we not heard anything from them. The issue of security, we not heard anything from them. Issue of Buhari told the whole Nigerians, told the whole world that any attack on Boko Haram is an attack on the North. We are not talking about all these issues. We should not castigate our president in place of the whole world. We don't know what happened during Lagos municipality. Other aspirants walked out of the process. We are not talking about that. What really happened, we did not know what to do. That's why there are issues also among APC couples. So this PDP is having issues and they are throwing it up for everybody to see. I think it's better off than someone calling people to sign another statement that I'm not leaving the party in my kids. It's wrong. That means I'm caged. I cannot express my opinions. All the president aspirants are we now sort of not happy with the process? They are not happy. They're going to just get silent. So I think we should educate Nigerians on the issues, not on propaganda, on convincing electorate. Thank you very much.
Well, good to hear from you, Stephen. Thank you for your contribution. Stephen Corden from Lagos. Now, I knew that PDP faithful were going to take your point. You said that the party was taking 2 steps backward, but we have to wrap up this segment now. We were talking about being able to curtail violence. At one side, you're against militarizing the process. But the other side, one would have thought that the only way to arrest gun-wielding political thugs and ensure a safe environment for ordinary Nigerians to vote would be to bring in law enforcement agents.
That's precisely the case. Law enforcement agents, not the military. Not the Nigerian military or the Nigerian armed forces. Law enforcement agents, like the police, the civil defense corps, even you have the mobile police unit. The fact of the matter is, it is against the constitution of this country to deploy soldiers for internal policing activities. It is against the law. What we need to do is simply to recruit more policemen. We've been on this for more than 6, 7, 8 years, talking about the need to have more policemen. Let me give you a good example. The total number of Nigerian policemen we have in the country is no more than 400,000. About half of them are on private security guard functions with different powers that be. Now, you have just about 200,000 to police, actively to police the rest of the country. And then you have quite a good number of them, in the offices doing the paperwork. So how do you intend to police a state like Lagos State that requires, if you are to go by international standard, Lagos State alone requires 2 million police officers? How do you intend to police Lagos State with the few number of police officers allocated to the state? So this is the real problem. We need, if we are serious about tackling crime, we really need to recruit the police officers and train them to be able to do the job and resource them, adequately. Coming to rely on the soldiers is like a fire brigade approach. It does not solve any problem. Soldiers are not trained, to investigate or to arrest or to prosecute. Soldiers are trained to kill, to defend the country, and by shooting. What they understand is shoot, kill and go. They don't understand, the other aspects, relating to it. Like, for instance, a police officer's duty is not just to deter people from committing crime, it's also to apprehend, suspected criminals, is to investigate and also prosecute. Given the Attorney General's consent, is to arraign the suspects in court. So when you look at all those processes, not a single soldier, has been trained to carry out those functions. That is why we can't keep using soldiers, to police the country during elections.
Biola Showme, thank you very much for coming today on Cool Digest. I've been speaking with Biola Showme, a public affairs analyst, and no doubt a political analyst on this show. We'll take a short break. Earlier we showed you how much of bad loser syndrome we had on the part of the electorate in Kwara, for instance, where certain PDP members protested the election of the Gapnashi aspirant under the platform of the PDP. On the other side of the discourse, we'll also be looking at the bad loser syndrome from the part of the aspirants themselves in the just concluded primary elections. Stick around to go ahead.
You can now watch Core TV News live from anywhere in the world on our website www.coretvnews.com. Click on Live TV on our website and watch us live.
And welcome to Core TV Primetime Days.
To follow us on Twitter, click on Twitter icon on our website. And Facebook, click on the Facebook and YouTube to see all our previous news production. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Click Core TV, leave a space, then news. Core TV News, a 24-hour news station.